Good. Well, it's been 12 months today since the Queensland Government was told to let the sunshine in, and all Queenslanders have seen is government dragged further into the dark. 12 months and there has been no movement on the release of Cabinet documents. 12 months and there's been no movement on the implementation of a clearinghouse for complaints. Beyond that, we still see a government obsessed with commercial incompetence and finding every way to keep information under lock and key that deserves to be in public hands. 12 months, and in the past week, we have seen the actions of a minister and a senior bureaucrat that will have sent shivers up the spine of the public service. A minister and a senior bureaucrat seeking to walk away from what was nothing more than an attack on whistleblowers, on journalists, and no one wants to accept responsibility. The government will view it as attempting to silence their critics. We view it as an attack on the institutions that keep government accountable. The doctors, the nurses, the allied health professionals, the paramedics, those people who are coming to us demanding action, and yet the government wanted to change the rules to stop them from doing that. And no one wants to own it 12 months to the day since they promised to do better. It's 12 months to the day, and yesterday we saw the Premier deny the government had been handed the report into Wellcamp. A good government would have released that. A good government would show that they're willing to learn from their mistakes of the past. This government seems obsessed with trying to ride things out, and we'll expect another Friday drop on this one because it'll be bad news and it'll be take out the trash day because this government won't accept responsibility for their failings. In its third term and looking for 14 years in office, the state government sees everything about its survival rather than doing better for Queenslanders who are seeing services break down in front of them. It is 12 months today since a landmark report, and yet government has never been conducted more in the dark in Queensland. Fiona Simpson is our Shadow Minister for Integrity. Good morning, Fiona.
Good morning. It's 12 months since the damning Coaldrake report was released. This report talked about letting the sunshine in, and yet what we've seen this week with this state Labor government is they've learned nothing, and critical issues that were recommended in this report still have not been addressed. The Coaldrake report particularly highlighted the bullying culture there was in the public sector, senior public sector, where you saw that there was, in the words of Coaldrake, ministerial staffers who are walking around like generals. There were directors general and also senior public servants who were deliberately not passing on information to ministers so they could have plausible deniability. And what have we seen this week? We've seen another damning revelation in regard to the Queensland Health senior bureaucrats trying to muzzle whistleblowers, trying to penalise whistleblowers, and then to allow potentially to go after the media who put a light and a voice to the whistleblowers' concerns about Queensland Health. The revelations this week, where we've seen a Queensland Health submission that was looking at penalising public servant. The revelations this week, where we saw Queensland Health looking to penalise whistleblowers and go after any media outlets potentially who use those words from whistleblowers to shine a light on what was happening in Queensland Health, shows nothing has changed. This report, it was released 12 months ago, and yet what we've seen this week is nothing has changed. The state government still won't take responsibility. You still have DGs and ministers claiming nobody knows anything when there's damning revelations about a push to try and bully whistleblowers still. The Coaldrake report had a number of key recommendations, but some of the most significant findings were around that bullying culture in the public service, in the senior public service, where they would go after whistleblowers. And what we've seen this week with the revelations about this Queensland Health submission to try and lock down whistleblowers is that they've learned nothing. This government's changed nothing in regard to that bullying culture. That phrase about plausible deniability, where there were senior public servants deliberately not passing things on to ministers or even on to other DGs, nothing's changed when we see this week that they still haven't learned the lesson and they're still not taking responsibility. So it's time that we saw genuine reform in regard to the integrity criteria that Coaldrake put forward. And the most serious recommendations that Coaldrake put forward still have not been addressed, such as the cabinet and confidence issues, such as this bullying culture and the fact that nobody will take responsibility. It's time that there was responsibility taken for the sake not only of those public servants who want to deliver good frontline services, but for the Queenslanders who deserve those good frontline services.
Over to you. Thank you. The culture in the Queensland government of cover-up is rotten from the top, and this report said it. This report spoke of a rotten culture 12 months ago, and yet the actions of this week shows that it could have been written yesterday. So before we focus on one individual, let us focus on a culture that is rotting the public service and denying those hard-working men and women who just want to serve Queenslanders because of that rotten culture from the Premier, the ministers, and many of those people that you refer to. And to see the actions of the last week where no one wants to own what was one of the great attacks on whistleblowers and journalists we have seen shows that nothing has changed. Nothing. And until that culture is reversed, the men and women who turn up every day to provide services for Queenslanders will continue to feel like they are under siege. Imagine being a public servant and reading that. Imagine being a doctor or nurse, knowing that you had an axe hanging over your head if you dare speak out about a rotten culture. 12 months on and not a thing has changed.
Say no?
Well, the minister can hold their Directors General accountable the way that they see fit, and ultimately Queenslanders will hold them accountable. But I'll make this point. Westminster government works by ministerial accountability, and the minister has refused to accept any responsibility. And now we've got the Director General walking away from it. So where is the Premier? Where is the minister? Who is stepping up to take accountability? That's the way Westminster government works. So that's a matter for the minister to hold her Director General accountable. But I'm on the side of the public servants who are living in the entrenched fear and the culture that's outlined here. I'm on the side of Queenslanders who are having their services rot in front of their eyes, and no one wants to accept responsibility. 12 months after they said we will be better.
How long should it take to release these cabinet documents? Obviously there'd be some information that would have to be redacted, but do you think the government will, I guess, hide behind that fact?
We respect that, but after 12 months and to see nothing other than a statement that this is a very complex issue shows that the government doesn't want to release these documents, and they will wait as long as they can, and they will wind down the clock as they are doing with the clearinghouse, because this is not an exercise in transparency for the government. It is an exercise in political expediency. It's an exercise in political survival. Their heart's not in these reforms. They were dragged to announce this review, and the fact that nothing has changed and the behaviour in the last week on the anniversary of a landmark document shows you that they won't change. After 3 terms in office, nothing has changed. The only focus of the state government is their political survival. And in the meantime, Queenslanders are seeing services rot before them, and public servants are living in a culture of entrenched fear.
If you've got a DG that signs his name to a submission to a review and then says, no, that wasn't me.
Yes.
What value is there in future reports, reviews?
Absolutely. I don't cop that ministers and Directors General can buck pass and refer their responsibility to someone else. That's not the way it works. They're in charge. They're the ones who are held accountable. And to see the exercise in duck shoving, diving, hiding, no one accepting ownership, 12 months after the government said it would do better, 12 months after it said it would let the sunshine in, government has never been dragged further into the dark in Queensland. And it doesn't work like that. You can't have ministers say, I wasn't aware. You can't have directors general say, well, that's my signature, but that wasn't my responsibility. That's not how it works. And that's not how it should work, because you have to have a point of accountability. And I'll say this, either a minister knows about it and is covering up, or a minister doesn't know about it and isn't across the brief of what is going on underneath their nose. But one way or another, someone has to accept responsibility. It doesn't work unless there is a point of accountability. That is the way our government is built. That is the whole premise of a Westminster government. And I can assure you, I wouldn't cop it from my ministers. Not a chance. And Queenslanders can look forward, if government changes next year, to the end of the chaos and crisis they are seeing and the commencement of calm and stable government. That's what Queenslanders need, because ultimately that's the way that you have your services delivered on time, on budget, world class, by having ministerial accountability, by having taxpayers valued, by having whistleblowers respected. And we don't have that in Queensland anymore. And what has happened in the last week shows that absolutely nothing has changed, and nothing will change until the government does.
Juveniles in residential care, more than 700 million spent last year, housing 1,700, many of whom are requiring extra help.
Well, the government's never spent more money and yet never got worse outcomes. And the government keeps on talking about record spend. The government keeps talking about record expenditure, but it's their record on caring for kids and keeping the community safe that Queenslanders care about. And these are eye-watering figures, but they aren't caring for children and they aren't keeping the community safe. And it just shows you that if people aren't held accountable, the merry-go-round of the broken system of caring for children and the broken system that is the youth crime crisis in this state continues. And it's deeply troubling. When you analyse some of these numbers, you're looking at an average of nearly $500,000 for a child, and one of them costing $2 million. And yet the government's record on turning young lives around, in caring for vulnerable kids, in keeping the community safe, well, that's in tatters, and no one wins when that happens. Thank you all very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.